All right, we're going to get started. So thank you everyone for joining us today for our webinar, Campus Critical Event Management. So as we get started, I'd like to introduce you to our two speakers today. On the right, that's myself. I am your moderator, Michael Scott. I am a senior marketing manager here covering the higher ed and government vertical, bringing together resources such as the one we're participating in today. To my left is Paul Timm. Paul is Vice President of Facility Engineering Associates. He's a board-certified physical security professional. He's the author of School Security, How to Build and Strengthen a School Safety Program, and a nationally acclaimed expert in physical security. In addition to conducting numerous vulnerability assessments and his frequent keynote addresses, Paul is an experienced crisis assistance team volunteer through the National Organizations for Victims Assistance, NOVA. He is certified in vulnerability assessment methodology, VAM, through Sandia National Laboratories and the ALPHA, Vulnerability Assessment Methodology. He is also a member of ASIS International School Safety and Security Council and the Illinois Association of School Business Officials Risk Management Committee. Currently working on his MD IV at Moody Technology Seminary, Paul holds a degree in speech communications and a certificate in business administration from the University of Illinois. So before we go through a couple more items, just a reminder why we're here today. First, campuses can be vulnerable to a wide variety of events, as we know. Preparation is going to be a key factor in determining if your resolution is successful. And as a reminder, what we're going to be going through today is going to illustrate that these events are not just limited to emergencies. They can be operational ones as well, as illustrated in the graphic below. So quickly, the agenda, we're going to talk about critical event examples, mass notification issues, compliance requirements, preparedness best practices, tools and resources, and then we'll open it up to a Q&A. With that being said, I'm going to hand it over to our speaker, Paul Timm. Paul, when you're ready, you may begin.
All right. If you can hear me, I am thankful for being here. I want to make sure that I'm moving to the right place on the screen. So let's just make sure that we're all good to go with that. And I think we should be set then. Does that look good to you, Michael?
Perfect.
Good, very good. All right, thank you for having me. I want to begin with
Do you mind over to on your GoToWebinar panel? Do you mind hitting not the X, but next to it there's a minimize button where it docks it up to the right of the GoToWebinar panel. So the one right above it. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, that helps then. Good. All right. Very good. All right. I want to begin with a story, and this story comes from one of my children who is in college years ago. By the way, I've got 3 in undergrad and 1 in graduate school working on his law degree. But that particular son who's working on his law degree went through the middle school and high school years with mostly B's, and he did fine, and we were glad about that. And except for gym class where he would get his A's. But you know, it wasn't the kind of thing where we put the bumper sticker that said honor roll student, so just keep that in mind. But when he got to undergrad, he kind of hit his stride, and every year he had been kind of getting a little bit better anyway. And once he got into college, he knew more of what he wanted to study. And so he came back after his first semester and had all A's and a B+, which at that particular institution counted for something to have that plus after the B. But he was thrilled, I was thrilled, and it was a celebratory time over the holiday season. And then he went back for his second semester of his freshman year. Right after he went back, I got a letter in the mail, and it said, "Congratulations, David is on the dean's list," which of course didn't surprise me at all. If you get all A's and a B, you should be on the dean's list. So I was happy for that, and it's one of those kinds of things you save as a parent. Well, he had not seen it. He had gone back to school, and when he went back, there was a duplicate letter in his CPO. And he opened it up. Now, I want you to imagine this is about 6 or 7 years ago. So as you think about how good you are now with your smartphone and texting and all of that, I believe we didn't have smartphones 6 or 7 years ago, but we were texting. Nobody was a great texter. My son was better than I was. And for those of you on the call, please don't imagine you came out of the womb as a great texter. But with texting, we never know exactly what the tone is. And I got a text from him after he got that letter. And he basically said in the text, "I got a letter, I'm on the dean's list." And I already having received the letter myself, I texted him back right away and I said, "Congratulations, you big show off." Just kind of tongue-in-cheek thing. And remember, him not knowing the tone, he responded with a text fairly soon afterwards saying, "What does that mean?" And now I started to feel bad because I wasn't trying to name call him or call him boastful or anything. And I just said, "Just that I'm very proud of you. Congratulations." And so I thought maybe that might make the whole stream go better. And then I get a text back from him almost immediately after mine, and it said, "No, what does it mean to be on the dean's list?" And so it's one of those moments as a parent where you're just absolutely thrilled because it's a sweet type situation for someone who had never been on the honor roll to all of a sudden find himself on the dean's list. So, of course, I saved that text strand, and it wasn't long after that my carrier had some kind of firmware update, and I lost it forever. But it lives now in the story, and I just wanted to share that with you. Okay, a couple of things that I want to do here with the agenda, and I'm going to be moving things a little bit so I can see this, but we're going to be talking about critical event examples. We'll also be talking about issues that other entities have encountered with mass notification. We'll talk about compliance requirements on the higher ed level, and I'm sure that will be on other levels as well. Preparedness best practices, and then tools and resources. At the end, we'll have an opportunity for Q&A, and I will also hand it back over to Michael at that point. Okay, I am, of course, that this was very practiced, and I had no problem moving from one screen to the next, and now, Michael, if you can hear me, I'm not able to move it to the next screen. So,
Paul, try clicking on it and just hitting the right arrow.
There you go.
There we go.
Thank you very much. It's just a clicking issue, see? And everybody now is saying, "Oh, that's the guy who has a problem texting 6 or 7 years ago." Yep, that's me. So anyway, a couple of these things are going to be sort of self-explanatory to you, but obviously we worry about violence issues on our campuses. And as we think about the issues that we are facing today, we come up with the term active assailant. Many of you are familiar with the term active shooter, and that term is sort of passé. It's going to be moving away because we're not just facing issues that involve guns, we're facing issues that involve blades and vehicles and the like. So all of those kinds of attacks we're going to be naming active assailant. And of course, you don't have to think too far to remember some of the more terrible ones that have occurred on campuses. Just this past couple of days, I was able to present on the same docket as Christina Anderson, who was a survivor from Virginia Tech. And I am talking with you right now from the state of Illinois, where not long after Virginia Tech, the Northern Illinois incident happened. I may make reference to those later, but we all know from what happened in Ohio with the person that jumped out of the vehicle to really it doesn't take much to think about what an active assailant situation would involve. We are also in about as much of a politically charged environment as I can remember in my 50 years. And And so protests on campus, in fact, campuses are scrambling to even block certain left or right-leaning people from coming on campus just because it causes so much volatility and the chance, the potential for some kind of incident. And I want to be very clear on this, that it's not always the protesters of those that are on campus that are causing the incident. Sometimes, and it's not always demonstrators for whatever cause they have that are causing the incident. Sometimes it's people who are offended by their demonstration or offended that people would have the gall to protest, and it doesn't take much to find ourselves in a milieu of violence. Now, there are other issues in the violence category as well, but I want to move also to remind you of what is far more likely to occur on our campus in terms of emergency, and that is environmental issues. Severe weather issues, whether you're more in the middle of the country where you're facing tornadoes. In fact, in the state of Illinois, we face on average 54 tornadoes every single year. That's on average. In a state like Texas, it's 155 tornadoes every single year. If we're talking about the East Coast, we're of course no stranger to nor'easters and a variety of other things. On the West Coast, where I just was, the weather is always perfect and no one ever has to worry about anything. And of course, I say that somewhat tongue-in-cheek as people practice the great shakeout and know that earthquakes are an ever-present threat. But not just severe weather incidents, hazardous materials incidents. And many of our campuses have hazardous materials on the property. There's research labs. And I grew up at Argonne National Labs, which is a Department of Energy facility in the Chicago area, but the University of Chicago actually manages that campus. And so there are people like a higher education place living on campus, and there in those days were also nuclear materials, uranium and plutonium supplies. Generally, those that are on this call aren't going to face those kinds of hazardous materials situations, but I find that on a lot of campuses they do have the materials necessary to make a dirty bomb, or they've got something as simple as chlorine, which if released can be very damaging. Hazardous materials from science labs. I want to pause just to let everybody know, if you have not heard already, that a private school, a private Christian school in Minnesota had a gas leak yesterday that led to an explosion where a number of people have lost their lives. And thankfully, school was not in session, but any loss of life is tragic. And so just to remind everybody that we face these kinds of situations. We also face medical situations, and whereas severe weather may be the most likely of things to occur, medical situations are an ever-present threat as well. And that's why many of us have outfitted almost every building on our campus with an automatic external defibrillator and first aid kits. And many of these things are code-driven. But I do find this, and I want to pause here just to remind you, if we have some kind of issue where a number of people, let's say, are getting sick from food poisoning, it doesn't take very long for people to say, oh, I got to go check in on somebody, or wait a minute, I was in that cafeteria, and you can get movement of people and hysteria that starts to fly pretty quickly. It calls for some kind of information to be disseminated, which is what we'll be heading toward in a short amount of time. And then finally, operational issues. And if anyone has ever really considered Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we know that safety and security is the foundational need right there. And people have begun now to dig down underneath that foundation and say, wait a minute, even more important than food and safety and security is the need for Wi-Fi and the access to outlets so that we can charge our phones. And of course, all that is being said tongue-in-cheek, but watch what happens just in a home when people lose Wi-Fi. Everybody starts to say, hey, I was trying to watch Netflix, or I was accessing the internet, or my data is now in jeopardy of being used up with my carrier. imagine what happens, and many of you have experienced this, of what can happen operationally if my assignment's due, I'm trying to upload it on Blackboard, and all of a sudden I find myself unable. We find these issues can really cause a lot of panic in a community. People want to know when that outage is going to be dealt with, when we're going to be back online, etc. So, and our IT department is generally bearing the brunt of that. They're trying to keep everything going, and now they're facing questions. So, operationally, we want to think about everything from Wi-Fi outages all the way to critical systems that could be down for an extended period of time. Let's talk about some mass notification issues that have been faced and are real concerns as we pursue this topic. First of all, it's reach. And as I mentioned, I've got 3 in undergrad and 1 in law school. I remember trying to get my oldest, years ago, to say, please promise me that you're going to sign up for the campus notification system. Because in those days, you could opt out, or it was voluntary, and it was not unusual for me to find a campus where I would say, what percentage of students do you think have signed up for the mass notification system, and find out that it was 20 or 30%, which of course is completely unacceptable. Then as the years went by, I would see my son or maybe my daughter say, hey, I cannot even enroll for classes until I've finished the campus mass notification system screen, completing that. And they would say it in somewhat of a complaining tone, and I would say, I don't care if you ever enroll for a class again, as long as you make sure that you are on the mass notification system. It's just that important to you and to me that be taken into account. And now, as I said, we're in the place now where at most campuses we're in the 90 percentile in terms of those specifically student stakeholder group that are now able to be reached, which is wonderful. And I know that we have people coming in mid-semester, and we have people changing phone numbers for whatever reason it might be, and whatever we can do to stay on top of that is of utmost importance. In terms of faculty and staff, same thing, because they're in our employ, we can get a very high percentage, and we would hope to even be able to get almost all of them. But we find that we have adjunct professors, and we have faculty that are part-time, and staff members that are turnstile in some of the departments of our campus. To make sure that we've got everybody enrolled is so very important. I don't know if everyone is following the news, but a story broke from Northwestern University today. There is an adjunct faculty member that's a person of interest in a terrible crime that was committed, and is on the run. And so how do we make sure that we have A to Z everybody accounted for? Let me go a little bit further. How about related stakeholders? Some of us have right on the center of our campus a retail store that's not us. I remember being on a campus in California, and they literally had a Home Depot on their property, or a high school on their property, or whatever it might be. Those related stakeholders must be on your mass notification system. Anybody who's on your campus on a regular basis must be able to be reached so that we can notify them about emergencies. And then finally, community. And this is where many of us that have notification systems have really fallen down. How about our near neighbors? Sometimes we've got a church that's just off campus, but we have a lot of interchange with them, or we've got emergency responders that have a station right off of campus. They should know right away, besides us calling 911, if there's an incident that we're reporting. We might have a school right down the road from us, whatever it might be. And let me turn that around. They have mass notification systems as well. We should be on their mass notification systems. And it doesn't take a lot of effort to just take a look at our surroundings and say, how does this make sense so that we can all be on the same page should an incident occur? I want to give a story about that. I remember I was working with some administrators on, and this is going to be ironic to all of you, on emergency preparedness issues, and I had been a resident of the community where the campus was, but had since moved away. But when I was a resident of the community, I had signed up for that village's mass notification system. And boy, at that time, I want to say probably of residents in the village, they had less than 10% that had opted in for that, which is just a shame. But anyway, I had since moved from that community, but now I was coming back to work with this particular entity that was located in the community, and I'm standing there with administrators, and I get that sound that we don't want to hear on our smartphones, and I looked at it, and it happened to be a severe weather warning. And while that's not as bad as an active assailant situation or what have you, it was still enough that the village had sent that out. And I remember it sort of interrupted me, and I looked at my phone and felt a little bit bad, a little bit better that it wasn't a terrible incident going on. But at the same time, I looked across the table at the administrators, and none of them had received any notification at all. They're residents of the community, and that they were right in the center of this community, this village. And so I said, did you not get the village notification? And I remember the blank stares on their faces saying, why are you getting a village notification? And just the utter helpless feeling of thinking, how can we not be coordinated with relevant stakeholders in a situation like this? But of course, it wasn't, and that's something that we all want to be working on. In terms of timeliness, I want to say this. When the Virginia Tech incident happened, and we're, by the way, now coming up on, or just past, the 10-year anniversary of Virginia Tech. It was in July 10 years ago. I think everybody remembers they had audio public address outside, but that day there were flurries and it was unusually cold, and there were not a lot of people outside ready to hear a public address announcement, and certainly they didn't have comprehensive coverage outside anyway on a campus that size. But they also sent emails, and of course many people were not at their workstations able to get a notification like that because people are mobile, and so it was horribly tragic that they couldn't reach so much of the population there. Not long after that was the Northern Illinois incident, and they felt like they had been a lot more prepared, and I want to say that within 30 minutes they were able to get out mass notification messages, including texts, etc., to smartphones. And while the tragedy was terrible, their reach in being able to notify the campus was reported to be exemplary. And I remember presenting alongside one of the survivors from Northern Illinois University and saying, well, you must have been glad at least you had some information coming to you fairly soon. And the person just kind of looked down and shook his head. And I said, well, you did get notified fairly soon, didn't you? And he said, oh, I know what was reported, and I believe that most of the campus got it just like they said in a short amount of time. But I've got saved right here on my phone in the text strand that I got my first message with any information, and it was more than 60 minutes after the incident. And so even in cases where, like I said, we had improved, the improvements had not been significant, or the gains were not as good as also had been reported. Those are mass notification issues that with today's technology, we hope to not have to look back on and say, wow, it was just left undone or slower than we thought it would be. And then, of course, I have on here methods, because what we do is we wonder in what kinds of methods that we will reach our people. And as I've said, email is one of them. Texts is probably the most important one. And there are other ways that we can reach people now. The big deal that I want you to think about when you're thinking about mass notification is that redundancy. If I'm not going to get it in one place, or in one manner, am I going to get it in another manner? And if I'm actually getting flooded with a couple of different ways that I'm getting it, I would much rather err on that side than on not getting it at all. I hope you all understand what I mean by that. I want to talk about some compliance requirements that we are beholden to. And as you see in the graphic over to the right, that's a Clery graphic. And so, you have to report incidents. You'll see that on the left side. And all the way over on the right, you have to publish an annual security report. But right in the middle of that, in terms of Clery requirements, are issuing campus alerts, including timely warnings and emergency notifications. So I want to just split those out for you, and also let you know that we'll have a resource at the conclusion of this this slide presentation, so that you can go through kind of a checklist from Clery to make sure you're compliant in every way that they're looking for. But in terms of timely warnings, what they're wanting to know, and what we should be glad to give them the information about, is what circumstances would dictate or necessitate, is maybe a better word, us having to send out a message to alert people on the campus and in the surrounding area. What kind of circumstances? And we've talked about that. Is it violence? Is it a medical issue? Is it severe weather or an operational type situation? And then the second thing in timely warnings is who is tasked with the responsibility of getting that message out. And this has been an area where campuses have had issues in the past. In fact, I was just at a fairly well-known conference, and I had a chief of campus security come up to me and say, up until just about 12 months ago, I was not even given permission to send out a message. It had to come just from the chancellor's office, or just, if it was another campus, maybe for the provost's office. And what a shame that is when we begin to operate in silos on the same campus, so that those who may be our very first responders, or knowing exactly what we should do in a situation like that, don't even have the ability to make those announcements. So Clery wants to know whose responsibility is it, and again, redundancy. I'll get back to that in just a minute. And then, in what manner will we be sending that out? And of course, I've just covered those electronic methods, and that we want to make sure that we're getting to people. But it must be specified in the documents that you're sending to Clery. The second part, and really the meatier part, is emergency notification and evacuation. That's really the second part of this Clery requirement. And you can see right here, they're going to want to know what processes you're following. And I'm going to be, there's maybe 8 or 10 questions on the PDF that you'll have access to later. And I've only got a couple bullets here, but the processes in gathering the information and making decisions on how the information will be sent out and who will send it out and in what way, the timeliness of doing that. And then, of course, because we want to err on the side of getting the information out right away. And then, of course, the last aspect is testing. It's one thing to have a system, but how often are we going to test that system? Once per semester, and what time during the semester? In the beginning of the semester, right at the outset, in the middle? So all of those things come under Clery, and as I said, you'll have that resource to look at a little bit later. In terms of preparedness best practices, I want to just talk about a couple things. First of all, collaboration. The magic formula for anything involving safety and security and emergency preparedness is always collaboration plus consensus. Nobody has shoulders broad enough to carry the whole emergency preparedness program. We must have members of the Chancellor's Cabinet. We must have people from public safety. We must have people from the mental health component on campus, all getting together, and our responders, for that matter, our emergency responders, all getting together and collaborating on how are we going to put our processes together, and how are we going to work together to get out messages and all the rest. So collaboration is always a big deal. Commitment is always demonstrated in things like the incident command system. I know that your public safety team, and if you're on it, good for you. You've already had NIMS 100, 200, 700, 800, etc. But what I find is in the chancellor's cabinet or the provost's office that they have no idea what the incident command system is, or if they do, they've kind of put together something during the hours of 7:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. But if something happens after hours, there's no one really, there are going to be no hands on deck instead of what should be all hands on deck. So I'm going to talk about how to address that in just a minute with a resource that I've included called the Staff Skills Survey. Also in preparedness, we want to make sure that we have drills and exercises. And one of them that I bring a lot to entities is a tabletop exercise. And maybe you've done that before, but there are elements of that. Michael and I have worked on this in the past to get this out to campuses like yours. But what kind of scenario? Do we have people plugged into the positions, everything from media coordination or what you would call your public information officer to someone who will handle operations and finances and all the rest. In a tabletop exercise, you can really cover a lot of ground and find your areas of need exposed. And by the way, while none of us want to find that there are gaps, it's so important to find them nonetheless so that we can address and prioritize what kinds of issues need to be, what gaps need to be filled. And a tabletop will help with that. And then, of course, testing. And testing just means now we're going to actually run a drill. And I know for those of you that are on this call, you may never have run a fire drill. You may never have run an active assailant drill. And I just have to tell you this, the time to do it is ASAP. And the reason why is there's only 2 times we know if our emergency procedures work. One of those is actually during the emergency, which is an inconvenient time to find out if they don't work. So we're mirroring Cleary and complying with it when we go in this particular direction. Here's a couple of tools I have for you, and then my next slide will be resources, and then I'll hand it back over to Michael. But this is the incident command system right over here on the left, and you'll see in these positions we need to have names, and then we need to have backups for each one of these positions, and then we need to have a backup for our backup. That's just the way it works because incidents don't wait until it's convenient for us. Over to the right, you will find what's called the Staff Skills Survey and Inventory. And this is really a great document because we have a hard time filling our incident command system or filling the backup or the backup slots. The Staff Skills Surveys help us find out among our staff and faculty who has particular skills, who can speak more than one language, who is former military or law enforcement and understands standard operating procedures, who keeps emergency supplies in their vehicles, who is currently certified in first aid, CPR, and AED. All of that becomes easy and tools much easier to put together when we have tools like this. And finally, for resources, I've just 4 that I want to share with you. The very bottom one is the Cleary checklist that I've been talking about now for a while. So I just want to scratch that one off right off the top. If you click on that link, it'll get you a PDF it helps you put together. Many of you have done this, or maybe your department hasn't done it, but you should be familiar with what it looks like. If we go back all the way to the top, the Department of Homeland Security, that's DHS, has a site for campus resilience where they'll touch on some of the topics that we've covered here today. The next one, the second one in line, is through the Federal Emergency Management Agency. That's FEMA, and you can actually have your administrators on your campus. Actually, there are 2 things that I want to talk about. The first FEMA, there's 2 right here in a row. The first FEMA one is going to help you put together a lot of your emergency plans and give you trainings that you can attend, mostly for no cost, to begin to put emergency preparedness things in place. But the one right after that is the basic NIMS, National Incident Management System, 100 level course. And as you can see, it's 100 HE, which stands for higher education. They've tailored that basic 100 level course, which is all about the incident command system, they've tailored it for higher education administrators. Your administrators can take that course online for free and in about 90 minutes get a certification that they've taken it and passed it. I want to tell you this. We are very close to there being a day where no grant funding to help with emergency preparedness will ever be available unless you can show that your administrators have been certified in the basic NIMS course. You have to be NIMS compliant, and I know that you are in many of your public safety offices, but it's the administrators that I'm wanting to make sure are also ready for this, and that the government wants to make sure is ready as well. So those are the basic resources I wanted to share with you, and now I'm going to turn things back over to Michael as we head into our Q&A.
Thank you, Paul. So before we begin our Q&A, I'm just going to go through a brief overview of Everbridge and some of the best practices we can employ with our solution. So as we had mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, you know, these critical campus events, they're really not isolated to just emergencies, although at the end of the day, life safety is the most important aspect. However, operations are important as well, and something that you need to consider when putting together these critical events, as they can, if operations aren't running smoothly, they could also affect life safety in some capacity or another. So, really what we're talking about is four things. You know, when an incident happens, ultimately you're looking to get the best assessment, figure out what's happening, accumulate the right information. During that time, you typically don't have hours, you don't have days, you have minutes, or in some cases maybe even seconds, where you need to coordinate your response teams and inform your campus community, let them know, let your campus community know what's going on in a certain area, whether you're responding to you know, a campus riot or protest and telling people to avoid that area, or whether it's your IT department, just letting them know that, hey, we're working on this student database outage. We'll inform you when it's back up, so you can decrease the calls to the help desk. So for incident response, again, just to reiterate, you need to give your students and faculty time to react. Speed and accuracy are going to be crucial during these times. When you need, and whenever you get the chance, whether you're using Everbridge or other solutions, build out incident templates within your solution if that's available. This can help you automate the process and decrease the amount of time it actually takes to reach people. Additionally, make sure that you're sending location-specific alerts through a multimodal process, meaning don't just send it through voice or email, or send it to them all when appropriate, of course. If it's an operational issue that isn't life safety, that might be a case where you're sending it through one modality. However, if it's a campus riot, that could be it could be a potential issue, life safety issue for your students. Then you're going to want to send it to all modalities, so you can increase the likelihood that you reach them. And just to reiterate that, share information through as many channels as possible. Beyond modalities, also think about your social channels. Integrate that with your mass notification system. So when you have these issues, not everyone has notifications alerts set on their phone. Most people do, but a lot of people also might get their information through Twitter or Facebook. So if you're connected or have those pages for your university, which I'm assuming a lot of these of you guys on the line today do, make sure in emergencies those are available for channels of communication. Additionally, quickly communicate with students and employees when buildings are closed or reopened. When you're having these issues, make sure you're communicating with them through the life cycle event. And again, you can build these out to automate in these incident templates. It's also important to be able to integrate with different databases, not just your HR or your student database, but even your scheduling database. So when you have these incidents, whether it's a routine Wi-Fi outage where you need to sync up with your ITSM when a ticket is created, to automatically deploy a message to whoever's on call, who has a certain skill set, or if it's an active shooter, you need to assemble local law enforcement or campus law enforcement, but you need to make sure you're calling the right people and also on the right devices who do possess the right skill sets or the right permissions to work on a certain event. Okay, so very briefly, give you guys a high-level overview about Everbridge. Ultimately, what our mission is to keep people safe and businesses and organizations running, whether it's a healthcare organization, a state and local government agency, or a higher education institution like many of you today on the line today. I know we're talking, I gave a few examples about active shooter, campus riots, IT outages, but really we're used for a wide variety of events as a true critical event management solution. So, we can be leveraged for weather alerts, medical emergencies, product recalls, hazmat issues, some of the issues that critical incidents that Paul had even alluded to. And just to give you an idea of where we are in different industries, we have 3,200 enterprise customers across every major industry, with 8 of the 10 largest U.S. cities leveraging us. And actually, all of the busiest North American airports are leveraging us now. And among 200 plus higher education institutions are leveraging us today as well. So I'm going to quickly launch a poll question for those of you who are interested in learning more about Everbridge after the webinar. I don't want to spend, again, too much time. I don't want to spend too much time on it. I know a lot of you want to get to the Q&A. So being respectful of that, let's just take, we'll just take 30 seconds. And if you're interested in having a rep follow up with you about some of the functionality and features and benefits and how you can partner with Everbridge in your university, just select yes or select no. So we're going to give it just another couple seconds. Okay, thank you guys for that. So let's now move on to the Q&A. It looks like everyone's a little shy on the line. We only got a couple questions in. So as a reminder, if you're trying to figure out how to ask a question or just haven't asked it yet, you can do so by going to the GoToWebinar panel on the side of your screen. Just select the questions drop down. Submit your questions to all panelists when you do submit them. So with that being said, it looks like we got a couple more that came in, so please keep asking them so we can have interactive Q&A. The first question for you, Paul, is from Joe in the audience. He must have missed some of or he wanted just a little more explanation on the difference between timely warnings and emergency notifications, and why timely warnings differ than them.
Well, I think that's sort of a distinction that you may want to ask Cleary about, because they came up with the distinction. But I think timely warnings is the simpler part. It's just trying to say, do you have a statement in what you have to send to Cleary that asks those 3 questions? And what circumstances would dictate a message? Who would have the responsibility of sending out that message, and by what manner? It's just that simple. There's really not much more to say in timely warnings. It's, as I mentioned, the meat of it is really in the next section, where we're talking about the notification and evacuation components. And notification is the processes that get followed. So the first part is really only going to be, here are the circumstances. I've listed them, boom, 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 maybe these 4 areas and some subgroups. Here's the person who has the responsibility. These are the means or manners by which we do it. The next one is really getting, and I strongly encourage you, Joe, to look at the PDF that I've put there in the resource section, because it's got questions that walk you through how to address all of what you are submitting to Cleary, and you can't go wrong by following it.
Thank you, Paul. So the next that question is referring to when I mentioned incident templates. So I can answer this one, Paul. So the question is, can you and Everbridge create standard incident templates for all event types, or is it just emergency? So Elena in the audience, yes. So with Everbridge, essentially with the incident templates, you're able to develop them from beginning to end, meaning you can create it for, as you had asked, for any incident type, whether it is that operational issue, such as, a Wi-Fi outage, and make sure that, all the right groups are included in that. So when, this type of event occurs, not only do you have messages already compiled, you have the right people within that template who will be notified. The same is true for, for example, if there is a school lockdown. If you need a school lockdown, prior to an event, there are certain knowns and unknowns. You don't know when it's going to happen or where on campus it might happen, the incident, or if it'll ever happen. However, if it does happen, you do know who should be involved, what message type should be sent. Again, there's some variable elements that you are able to edit, but what our solution allows you to do with our incident templates is automate the variables that you are aware of before an incident. I hope that answers your question. So the next question, Paul, for you is, in your experience, should schools create internal ICSs for incident preparation, or just external IPSs with local law enforcement agencies?
Well, the incident command system is something you have to do internally. Your emergency responders already have their incident command system, the members of that put in place. And if you do have a very large incident, when they come, they're going to be the incident commanders. The incident command system is kind of filling in that piece of time between when the incident happens and when the responders come. And we don't always know that the responders are going to be right there. It just doesn't always work that way. And so, and we may then continue in our own incident command team or some fashion of that after they take over the incident anyway, because we're looking at things from a campus perspective. So you've got to put your own together. That's the bottom line. And when you put it together, to share it with your emergency responders, I think is a great idea. But the more difficult part is just putting it together. And so, I would get to it. And that resource from FEMA of the 100 HE will help walk you through the process of having that.
Thank you, Paul. So I got a couple more questions regarding Everbridge and how we're leveraged for university. So just so everyone knows, I do have a handout for our critical event management solution for higher education. It's actually in the handout section. So if you go to that, select the drop-down, you can actually access the file there. It'll give you a brief overview of how we're used for these different scenarios. And give you an idea if it's a solution that might be worthwhile for you guys to pursue. With that being said, next question for you, Paul, is how do you? First off, I think the answer to the yes, but I'll ask it. But it is a two-parter, and it's from Jack in the audience. He wants to know, Paul, do you recommend running drills on the campus, and if so, how often?
Great question. Well, it depends on the kind of drill. If it's a fire drill, I'm thinking that should probably happen a couple times a year. If it's an active assailant drill, you might be able to get by with that once a year. But I want to explain a little bit more about drills. They're like rungs on a ladder. So what you don't want to do is start with a campus-wide full-scale drill. You're not ready for it, and it takes a lot of time to put it together and it's some expense, at least in resources, to get that going. What you want to do is, first of all, make sure that you've got your procedures in place. You've got some kind of collaborative effort with your emergency responders. Once we begin to have that foundation, we now can maybe do a tabletop exercise. And again, a tabletop exercise is all just sitting around in a room. Someone throws out a scenario and a timer gets set, and we read the scenario, we look at some questions, we have X amount of time to answer those questions, and the whole thing should be time bounded so it's not going on forever. Once we've gone through a tabletop exercise, we are going to be running, and by the way, you probably don't need a tabletop exercise to run a fire drill since we've all done them for the last 60 years. It's been mandated. At least in K through 12 it has. We're not doing it on a lot of higher ed, but we should be doing those for sure, and we can do those. But you can start with an isolated building and then do another section of campus where you run the drill. Please just plan all of this in collaboration with your emergency responders. They will hold your hand all the way through. That's the way to do it.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. So I don't see any more questions in at this time. So with that being said, I'm going to conclude the webinar a little early, give you guys did one just come in? 1 second. Okay. So, Paul, it's for you. So it's from Kevin in the audience. He wants to know, where do I find the PDF documents you were referencing during your briefing?
Well, it's right on the resource slide. I don't know if you can easily move back to that or not, Michael, but the resource slide has the links for you. And if you were saying, wow, I can't see the screen or whatever it might be, you could just put in Cleary and timely warning into a search engine and you would come up with this right away. But there it is. Thank you for bringing that back, Michael. And I just want to say this, occasionally I know people have questions after the webinar. If you want to connect on LinkedIn, you can find me at Paul Timm PSP, which stands for Physical Security Professional. Paul Timm, 2 M's, PSP. Or if you want to follow us on Twitter, it's just @SchoolSecurity. It's that simple, @SchoolSecurity. But I'd be glad to connect with you offline if you have questions that come up later. But these are the resources I think would be super helpful for you.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. And also, I'll be sending, just as a reminder for everyone, I will be sending out the recording and the slides within the next couple days. So if you don't get it by tomorrow, you'll have it in your inbox on Monday. Registered for the webinar, and you'll be able to share that with colleagues as well. So at this time, I want to thank everyone for joining us today for this webinar, and also to our speaker, Paul Timm. Keep an eye out for some of our upcoming webinars and the resources that we'll be emailing to you that cover this webinar. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.